not controlled by human. Thank you, ID, for joining our live. And I am so sorry for anybody watching. I am super sorry, and thank you for your patience. We've just had a little bit of technology problem. I'll first introduce myself, and then I will give my guests the opportunity and platform to introduce who they are. I don't want to spoil anything out of the bag, but I want you to understand the person she is, what she does, and what she represents, because she is a people leader. And I think it would be great to just pick some insight on helping break down the barriers that women face, especially trying to integrate in the Canadian workforce. God knows that I have had my own share of trying to break those barriers down since being here 6 months ago. So I would start. My name is Vivian Ogunsipe. I am one of the co-founders of InspireWave HR. And one of our missions is to help and support immigrant women, people of color, and young adults with the right resources and platforms to integrate within the Canadian workforce. Today, I have with me a special guest and who has a PhD. So technically, we should be calling her a doctor. Dr. Idowu Mogaji. I would give you, Idowu, the opportunity to introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Idowu Mogaji. I've known Vivian for, I think, 2 decades now, thereabouts. We went to university together. So, like I said, my name is Idowu Mogaji, Dr. Idowu Mogaji. I'm based in Canada, Yellowknife. I work with Aurora College. I am the Assistant Vice President, Community and Extensions, and I'm also the co-chair of the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee here at the college. Oh. That's keeping it brief.
Oh, wow. As in, like, you're really, really doing it for women out here. I mean, it's a big deal being with myself being in people and culture, being a chair of EDI it's a big deal. And I know that EDI isn't something that has been successfully integrated in Canada. It's still upcoming and still growing, but it's a really, really, I mean, you should be very proud that you're representing us, we immigrant women, and, you know, and I hope that my aim with this life is that people will take 1 or 2 lessons out of it and understand that there are barriers, you know, especially if you're moving to the West, you know, the Western world, there are severe barriers that you would face, not only as an immigrant, and even women, there are conscious bias within those workforce. So Dr. Idowu, thank you again for joining us. And I will be asking you a few questions. And if you could just give us your examples and, you know, whatever you think can be very relatable to those questions in terms of support and resources to people watching here. Can you tell us about the challenges that immigrants, women and youth face when trying to integrate in the workforce?
I would say it's multifaceted because, honestly speaking, integrating into the Canadian workforce can be truly challenging, but not impossible. Challenge can be overcome if you prepare for it. But I think one of the biggest challenges we face as immigrants, especially for newcomers, is the credential recognition. So we hear a lot whereby, you know, you have to show that whatever qualification you had outside of Canada is equivalent to whatever it is in Canada. And that's why we have things like WES, you know, so many newcomers may hold professional qualifications or degrees that are not immediately accepted. Eventually, they will be accepted, but they're not immediately accepted in Canada. For example, let's look at the medical field. Medical doctors cannot just come into Canada and practice just like that. It takes a lot of process. I remember in my case, so I read education. And from Nigeria, I had my TRCA, which is a Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria.
Yeah,
that's the body that license that gives you your license. And when I got into Canada, even though I was not immediately sure if I wanted to teach, if I wanted to go into the K to 12, I decided to get my license here in Canada just in case. And I knew, and then I was based in Ontario. So I had to go through the OCT, which is the Ontario College of Teachers, and it was a process. It was a process that I know some people actually do give up.
Yeah.
And that's not only because of the OCT process, but also back home requesting for transcripts, having to go look for someone to help you go to Abuja to collect some letter of good standing. All that process of getting your credential recognized here in Canada is not for the faint-hearted. Um, but once you get that,
Immigrants, women, and youth face when trying to integrate in the workforce?
I would say it's multifaceted because honestly speaking, integrating into the Canadian workforce can be truly challenging, but not impossible. Challenge is can be overcome if you prepare for it. But I think one of the biggest challenges we face as immigrants, especially for newcomers, is the credential recognition. So we hear a lot whereby, you have to show that whatever qualification you had outside of Canada is equivalent to whatever it is in Canada. And that's why we have things like WES, so many newcomers may hold professional qualifications or degrees that are not immediately accepted. Eventually, they will be accepted, but they're not immediately accepted in Canada. For example, let's look at the medical field. Medical doctors cannot just come into Canada and practice just like that. It takes a lot of process. I remember in my case, so I read education. And from Nigeria, I had my TRCA, which is a Teachers Recognition Council of Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria.
Yeah.
That's the body that license that gives you your license. And when I got into Canada, even though I was not immediately sure if I wanted to teach, if I wanted to go into the K to 12, I decided to get my license here in Canada just in case. And I knew, and then I was based in Ontario. So I had to go through the OCT, which is the Ontario College of Teachers, and it was a process. It was a process that I know some people actually do give up.
Yeah.
And that's not only because of the OCT process, but also back home requesting for transcripts, having to go look for someone to help you go to Abuja to collect some letter of good standing. All that process of getting your credential recognized here in Canada is not for the faint-hearted. But once you get that, that is one stage into integrating into the workforce. And I think another theme I would say could be language barrier.
Yeah.
And language barrier can come in different forms. It can come in form of even your diction. I know at times initially people are like, oh, sorry, could you repeat yourself? And I'll roll my eye out like, oh no, I'm speaking English, so that language barrier and language proficiency is crucial for effective communication in the workplace. So immigrants, especially those who are still improving their English or French skills, it depends on which province you're based in. It could be English or French skills, people that are still improving it may face challenges in expressing themselves clearly. And this could result in misunderstandings and it could also affect teamwork and career advancement. For women in particular, I think one of the biggest challenges for us here in the Western world is the gender bias and stereotypes. Women often encounter biases that may limit their career opportunities. For example, women may face challenges into breaking into male-dominated industries
That's
like
right.
technology, mining, construction.
Yeah.
These biases can also affect their progression. At times, they even get in, but to progress is also another problem because they will look at it that you can't have that work-life balance. So those are some of the that comes to my mind immediately now, some of the barriers and challenges. But like I said, there are challenges that can be overcome. It takes a lot of determination and preparedness to forge ahead.
Yeah. And just to add to what Dr. ID is saying, I remember when I first came and I remember calling you when I was still back in UK and I'm like, oh, how do I go about trying to get a job in Canada, given the fact that I've lived in UK for over a decade? And I'm like, I don't know where to start from. Yes, we'll do two shows. Yes. So I was like, I don't even know where to start from. But I remember that coming in, and I've been a people leader for a very long time. And I remember coming in and I would get organizations that would interview me, on paper and the fantastic candidates. And they would turn around and say, oh, but you don't have Canadian experience. And now one of the things I was so keen on was challenging that status quo. Like, what is Canadian experience? Like, for me, I believe transferable experience to that specific industry should be key in looking for your right candidate. So no one, not even any agencies, and these are big companies, I tell you, these are very, very big companies that I have had to challenge. They probably be like, we don't want this African person to come and overturn our, our company in a day life. But I had to challenge it, and I still haven't gotten an answer. Like everybody I've spoken to, what is a Canadian, you know,
I think
culture? I don't know what that means. Like, you know.
I think at times it comes with a catch-22. So for those that do not know what a catch-22 is, it's that dilemma, a dilemma that are difficult to navigate because of conflicting conditions. So in our context now, in the context of our discussion, it's whereby job requirements say you must have Canadian experience, and they're not giving you the opportunity to have that Canadian experience.
That's
So how do
correct.
you then get the Canadian experience?
Yeah.
But so we get things like that, and the lack of experience, and not because you're a newcomer, not because you cannot get the job though, but because you're just new to Canada, new to the context, but you might have had 10 years of experience back from where you're from.
Yeah.
And I think that is where also, and because we're talking of challenges, I'm going to limit it to challenges. Hopefully, maybe I could provide solutions. But
Absolutely.
that catch-22 is something you hear a lot about Canadian experience, and also limited networking opportunities is some of the experience, some of the challenges, like one of the challenges, because you're new into this market, you're new into Canada. It might not even be new. So the new is relative. It could even be 2 years and you're still trying to navigate your way. It could be 3 years and
Absolutely.
you're trying to navigate your way. And you do not have those professional connections that could help you. You do not know where to tap into,
Sure.
and that also limits opportunities for people to navigate into or integrate into the job market.
Exactly. I think it's very, just to round up that question, I think it's very important as a new person coming into, especially into whether it's the UK or Canada, essentially, it's very important to network. Referral is a thing. I did not know referral is a thing in Canada. Referrals are
It's
not things in
interesting.
the UK. It's based on you apply for a job, they would accept you based on your skills and how you interview. But referrals are a thing. So it's very important to network when you come in, find those groups, those platforms where you can speak and understand the industry you're going to. Get someone to look at your resume, because formatting is also a thing. CV formatting is a thing in Canada. Never was. But it's so interesting, and I get questions like, Vivian, how did you do it? Like 6 months and you got less than 4 weeks of being here, you got a job. How did you do it? I'm like, well, because I had to understand what those challenges are. I'm coming from a different geographical location into another complete context. And I had to understand how this functions. Like, I don't want to, as people will say, oh, start from the bottom and you work your way up. And I'm like, no, less than 4 weeks of being here, you got a job. How did you do it? I'm like, well, because I had to understand what those challenges are. I'm coming from a different geographical location into another complete context. And I had to understand how this functions. Like, I don't want to, as people will say, oh, start from the bottom and you work your way up. And I'm like, no, I'm not starting from the bottom. I've had this experience. I've coming out from a very strong role, working in the NHS for many years. I'm not just going to go from head of medical HR to HR administrator. That doesn't, like, even me, I'm not going to challenge myself. I'm not going to learn anything, because that means all my strategic experience and my operational experience will take a backseat to just
Mhm.
basic admin. So I did wanted to surround myself with people who are already leaders, who have advanced within the people and culture, industry, what that industry look like. Okay, what should I do? How do I do my CV? How do I prepare for interviews? So it's very important to network. Just rounding up that question. And thank you, Heidi, for answering those challenges that you feel like immigrants face, because there are a lot of unconscious bias within recruitment. And then the second one is, I mean, we've already talked about the language training programs, but there are also, what do you think are specific resources and support that can help immigrants, integrating into this workforce?
I'm going to start by thinking of immigrants now as newcomers, newcomers to Canada. So one of the things I would always suggest is to utilize your community centers and newcomer services.
Yeah.
These services are established in practically all provinces, so you just need to find out where it's located. And you find out that these services, they provide a lot. So using myself as an example, I came into Canada 5.5 years ago. Yeah, 5.5 years ago. And I knew immediately I came in, I contacted Professional Knots. So I told you I was initially based in Ontario. So
Yeah.
Professional Knots was the newcomer service I contacted. And they were awesome. They helped with my resume, formatting. They taught me the skills of anytime I had to do an interview, they were always a phone call away. I would do my demo. They would with them. They would they were always available for that practice, with me. So newcomer services, they provide settlement, employment, social services, skills enhancement, legal assistance, education services. Services they provide is a lot, and I think we do not tap into it enough. Thinking because I'm a professional, I have skills where I'm coming from, but my sister, tap into this thing because you never can tell. Another thing I would say is utilize mentorship programs.
That's correct. Yeah. Absolutely.
Utilize mentorship initiatives, especially for women. Mentorship initiatives can help women navigate career challenges. We have organizations like Women in Capital Markets. We have Vivian's organization also offering mentorship programs, because these programs connect you with experienced professionals in your field.
That's correct.
And it helps. They tend to guide you, and they also provide you networking opportunities. If I'm to use myself for an example, my first mentor when I came to Canada was a school superintendent in Timmins. She was a school superintendent, and because of our time, she was always very busy. So we used to meet in the evenings. Probably we go for dinners or late lunch, and she would just okay, I need you. I spoke about you to somebody. This person wants to meet you. This person wants to meet you, and she was just so awesome. Like when I needed referrals or when I need someone to write a reference for me, she was always, because that's another thing. People need you to have Canadian references. Where would I get the references from? So that's where the mentor came in. So utilizing mentorship programs is also very important. I would also suggest for people that need to improve their English or French skills, that, like I said, depending on the province you are in, utilize the language training programs. Some of them are free, and some of them you can get from the newcomer services. These programs help improve English or French language skills. And some at times it's not even about, not because you don't speak well, not because you do not understand English. Some of these, exactly, your delivery of how you speak. And at times communication just goes beyond speaking. It's also about your body language when you're speaking. I listened to a lot with my eye, and they were like, "Oh, you're rolling your eye." I was like, "Shoot, I didn't just roll my eye." So utilize the language training centers because they teach you way more than just how to speak. They teach you about your body language and things like that. What else is there? I think big for me is actually the mentorship. And also I would suggest to people that if you want to break even at times, especially as new, don't get frustrated. I understand the frustration that comes with it, but maybe volunteering for some people is also the way. Because that gives the opportunity to network, to meet people, and to talk about yourself. Practice your 3 minutes elevation speech, so that anytime anyone talks to you, you're ready to talk about something, relevant. So I would just to wrap it up, utilize newcomer services, Mentorship programs, very important. Internship and apprenticeship programs also, really.
They were.
People don't tend to think about that. We have a lot of internship and apprenticeship programs that help youth especially gain valuable work experience, especially the Canadian work experience. So we're in Ontario. We have the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program that connects people, newcomers, with employers, and they provide hands-on experience on various trades. And you never can tell. You might find your passion in trades that you never knew you
That's
had.
correct.
So
Yeah.
we also have counseling services that help a lot. And you might wonder, oh, but there's nothing wrong with me. But this counselor services also do career exploration programs. And so that's where you want to be. I think
Yeah.
it's about just being proactive and
Very.
finding out in your location what is available in my location, because no two provinces is similar. We have distinct differences. So utilize whatever service is available and network with your fellow immigrants that have been there before. Pride or this, oh no, this person will look down on me. My sister, forget it. If they look down on me, that's fine. But you're getting what you
What you
subscribe
need.
for,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So look for people in your field that are here already that can just help you, that can talk to you, that can link you up, or that can just generally encourage you. So
Absolutely.
I think that's it for me. I can hear you, Vivian.
Neighbor whose son plays for the Canadian football team. And I remember I was just telling her, people are culture, and she has good professional connections, because this was a group dedicated to people of culture, and they are existing in every province, right? But I had made good connection, and I was able to understand, okay, what am I doing? And I remember speaking to one of them, and she was like, you know what, Vivian, why not go into contracts? I know you're looking for permanent full-time, but why not try agencies? And as soon as she told me, I remember becoming a nuisance. I practically was calling every agency between Calgary to Edmonton. I will go to downtown and walk into those agencies. If they got so fed up of me, Robert Half especially was like, you know what, okay, let's have a sit down. Let's review your resume. And that's how I got my job. I got my role. I came into that organization as an agency for like 3 months, and they were very happy with what I was doing. And they were like, oh, we're looking forward to offering you this role on a full-time basis, right? So it's all about networking, as ID say. Utilize the platforms that you have. As much as even when I wanted to start my non-profit organization, I was speaking to another colleague who's been doing this for 2 years, and we will go on dinner. She'll be like, Vivian, you have all these ideas, put them in paper, narrow them out, define what you want to do, define your aim, define your tagline. And she was working with me every step of the way. So I wouldn't be here without having someone like her. It's very important to find a body, find a platform, get all those skills that you require. And that's the only way you can integrate and break down. Because again, I cannot overemphasize this. There is absolutely discrimination and unconscious bias within the Canadian workforce. So you just need to make sure that you're doing your best proactively to break down those barriers and not limit yourself, and you would always get the no's. Oh God, for God knows for how many no's I got. But I wasn't concerned. At a point, I would start deleting the no's. When I see, unfortunately, you have not delete. Unfortunately, delete. That's all I was doing. I wasn't reading. I was not interested because I didn't take it personal. I knew it wasn't me. I just looked at it. I'm not your right fit. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I know the right person would come with the right. And I'm super happy where I am, So I think, thank you, ID, for just, helping with those responses and those, key things that we can pick up on. And, you talked about I know you're the co-chair of the EDI Forum. What do you think Canadian organizations can do to help that inclusion for immigrants into the Canadian workforce? Because I think, like I said, EDI is it's not still a thing, it's growing. I've had to do a lot of EDI initiatives in my current organization. So I know it's a growing topic, but yet a sensitive topic. You know, what do you think organizations or people like us who are within a people leader position can do to enhance those inclusions?
I would say the first thing for me is organizations need to learn how to be open-minded,
Mm.
and it begins with diverse hiring practices. So I don't know if you've ever heard this. This never happened to me though, because anyone that knows me knows as a Catholic, I have my baptismal name, which is English, but I never use it. I remember many people like, but it's always on my resume. So I use my full name. It's always my full name, Idowu Mary
Mary
Mogaji. But if you call
Mogaji.
me Mary, I would not answer you because I did not introduce myself as Mary.
Yeah,
So if I tell you my name is Idowu, I expect you to call me Idowu.
that's
So
right.
that's how I write my name, but I go by Idowu. And I remember, someone talking to me, I think 2 weeks ago, sharing a story with me. She's Asian. And she was telling me that she had to, um, I don't know if you've noticed at times that some Chinese people have their Chinese name, but they didn't look for an English name, you know. So she's Asian, but she doesn't have an English name. So she had to, I think she just felt like she was not being called for interviews because of her name.
Mm.
So she had to change her name on her resume and put in a normal English name.
Mm-hmm.
And she got called for the interview. But it's 50-50.
Mm.
That's an assumption. So I think, but I know I've heard it a lot where people say that they just screen you out immediately just by your name because they can't pronounce it or because they
That's
feel like, okay,
correct.
this obviously is not Canadian. This
Yeah.
obviously is not, just from your name. And I just find that as an unethical practice. So one of the things I keep saying, or one of the things I clamor for is implementing blind recruitment processes. Where names
Yes.
and identifying information are removed from
Personal
resumes
information.
during initial screenings. And
Yeah.
this will help combat unconscious biases, and it will also ensure fair consideration for candidates
Yeah.
based solely on qualifications and
Yeah.
experiences. So that's one thing I clamor for, blind recruitment processes. Another thing is generally looking at equitable workplace policies.
Yeah. That's true.
If I am to work for you, one of the things I do anytime I feel like, okay, I want to move to the next stage of my life. If I'm to work for any organization, the first thing I do before I apply to any organization is I go on their website. If they do not have an ADI policy, I'm not interested. No, I'm telling you, because it's one thing to get to an organization, it's another thing for that organization to give you the room to grow.
Mm.
I don't want to get into a job and get frustrated
Absolutely.
because I'm the only kind of person, I'm the only person of color, or
Yeah.
I've passed that stage. So I start by looking at your website to see those in your board. I look at a couple of things before I decide if I want to go into the organization or if I'm even interested in a position. And
Yeah.
and most organizations have their policies online, so you can see these things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I can find it online, that means it tells me,
You're hiding something. You're not being
or you're not diverse enough.
inclusive. You're
You're
not
not, you're not
diverse enough.
inclusive. So I encourage organizations and businesses to establish policies that actually do promote work-life balance, such as flexible working hours, remote work options, parental leave, for example. This contributes to creating an inclusive work environment. And also for women, it also supports women in balancing career and family
That's
responsibilities.
correct. Yeah.
Um, I would also want to see more organizations doing mentorship and sponsorship programs
Yeah.
uh, that pair experienced employees within the organization with newcomers. This helps immigrants actually integrate into the workplace. Sponsors within the organization can actively advocate. So, for example, we hear a lot that it's not easy for women to break that glass ceiling. And truly, that's
It's
that's
not.
that's true. That's
That's the
true.
reality. Yeah.
It's the norm. If You break that glass ceiling, you're just 1% of the 1%, when you look at it. But if we have more people, like for me, now I'm an assistant vice president. One of the things I take seriously now in my role is mentorship. You're just 1% of the 1%, when you look at it. But if we have more people, like for me, now I'm an assistant vice president. One of the things I take seriously now in my role is mentorship. So I try to start raising people that we don't have to look outside when we're looking for that position, someone. So I
Mhm.
try to mentor that, prepare you for, and I think more organizations should do that. It gives people within the system an opportunity to grow,
That's
especially
correct.
for people of color, for women,
Yeah,
and for people that do not see themselves represented at the top.
absolutely.
So that mentorship program is very important, and I think organizations should train more people, especially their leadership, on diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely.
There are lots of programs out there. We have the CCDI, we have SICAN, and now Vivian, your organization, InspireWave.
Yeah.
So I think conducting regular diversity and inclusion training for employees, especially leaders within organization, could help foster a community of understanding. By providing scenarios and case studies, organizations can actually help employees recognize and address biases and
Mm.
creating a more inclusive atmosphere, because this is very
Absolutely.
important.
It
As
is.
little as when people ask you, where did you learn to speak English?
Mm. Yeah,
And I
it's
say,
very
oh,
important. It's
yes,
very important. I mean,
and
when I started working in my organization, it's a heavily emphasis on heavily
mhm,
dominated white industry, all the way from the top to the bottom. And I remember my HR director, she's pretty new as well. She's from Ontario, and I always make fun of her and call her Ontario. And we kind of laugh about it, right? And I was like, we don't have any EDI. I'm not used to this. And like you said, as someone in people and culture, one of the first things I did, I took charge of the talent side of things. I introduced the blind shortlisting. So take out any personal information, name, address, phone number, location, even as much as taking out the name of their employer. So I focused
mhm,
on only the skills they had delivered within each of their assignments they've done. And I send it out to the manager. And it was, everyone came in because I came in like a hurricane and I like threw everything they knew out, what they were used to. And that's just who I am. I'm not afraid to challenge the narrative. I really am not. But it gave them an idea, it opened them up. And I said to my director, I was like, look, we need to start doing trainings. We need to start incorporating unconscious bias trainings. We need to create leadership essential trainings for our leaders, our people leaders, to say, look, we need to start being inclusive, because I would have a people leader come and say, oh, Vivian, I want to fire this person. This is a real life scenario. I was like, why do you want to fire this person? This team member is she's a Latino. And as you know, Latinos can be as fiery as Nigerians and with their bubble head and their hands like that. And she just termed us, oh, she's aggressive. I was like, well, I talk with my hands all the time. My hands are always in my face, and my heads are swaying left, right, and center, but it doesn't make me aggressive. My demeanor isn't aggressive. I was like, so it could be a position where you're being unconscious that, oh, because she has a larger tone, a higher tone, and with all those demeanors means she's aggressive. Not saying there's not a coachable moment for this employee. Obviously there is. However, it's the narrative that because she's of a certain color and she's a black Latino, right? Means, oh, she's aggressive. We
mhm,
can't deal with this. And I'm like, sorry, I cannot fire this person based on these reasons. We can
mhm,
coach both yourself as the hiring manager and your team to get to a middle point of, okay, understanding this is professional ethics, this is how you conduct yourself in a workplace, and you yourself have to be inclusive, that there are newcomers coming in straight out of their country into Canada, and they're still trying to understand the culture, right? So that was one of the motives that I was like, okay, I need to do a leadership training. I need to get everybody to understand EDI. We have to have equality. We have to have, I don't even like calling it equality. I call it equity, because we're
Equity.
never going to be equal. Equity, we are going to be diverse in the way we think, in the way we work, in the way we speak, in our philosophies, in our views of life. Like, we're just always going to be diverse, not just in our color, right? But we also have to be, how do we get to be inclusive, to say, with all these big personalities and all these big ideas, how do we make it such a positive workplace culture that allows people to thrive, right? But it also starts from the leaders, right? And managing it down, cascading that information down to ensuring that their teams are able to thrive, not be afraid to be themselves. Because God knows how many times my director might be like, oh, Vivian, we don't say that in Canada. Oh, Vivian, we don't do that in Canada. Oh, Vivian, we don't do that in Canada. And I'm like, are we all sensitive in this Canada? Like, we don't say this, we don't do that, we don't do this, we don't do that. But I'm also taking into recognition that, hey, Vivian, this is their culture, right? You have to find a middle point of not losing yourself essentially, but also integrating into that Canadian life culture, right? So those things are coachable moments. And I really do agree with you that it starts from, I think from a people and culture person, I would say it starts from the recruitment process, and then employee engagement carries on. But yes, absolutely, ID. And just, I know that we have only 3 more minutes because you're off. So it's, is there any conclusion you think we should know? And, obviously I would always like to invite you back for a more thorough and detailed conversation, just because of the time.
Thank you. Yes, I have to run actually. But in conclusion, I would just say that people should take ownership of their learning and their growth and their integration. You cannot leave it in the hands of your employer or in the hands of a friend. You can ask for guidance, and that's why it's called mentorship. I can mentor you, but eventually, as the mentee, it's left to you to decide what you take from the section. And that's about it in terms of workplace integration. I would suggest that people do their homework, prepare for it. If you know you're in education, where I am, I'm in the academic field, look at what is it that will make you stand out. How can you utilize your skills? So take your learning, your professional development, your skill development into your hands. Take ownership of it. Try to understand the Canadian workplace culture, network and build connections, utilize settlement services, utilize professional networking platforms like LinkedIn, for example. I know how many people I've met on LinkedIn that has bettered my life. So just be proactive generally. So my concluding word is be proactive in everything that you do. And the sky is your starting point. There is no limitation.
Well said, Dr. Idowu. Well said. And I hope to everyone that this has been very valuable